From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie, and welcome to Coast AM. Last hour tonight, Joshua P. Warren joins us with his paranormal moment. Here's what's happening. A rapid series of strong earthquakes hitting off of China's provinces early Wednesday. At least 67 people killed. That number will go up much higher. Many others feared buried under debris under a 6.9 magnitude earthquake that struck at 7:49 p.m. Eastern Time, when many people there were probably still at home. When a driver hits his brakes, friction releases copper shavings that fall into the road and are eventually washed into rivers, where environmentalists say metal could pose a hazard to marine life, especially salmon. Now, one of the Pacific Northwest's most prized products, of course, is salmon, and they're going to try to protect it. Washington State responded to the problem last month by becoming the first in the nation to pass a law to phase out the use of copper in brake pads. This move could eventually make copper-free pads the industry standard in the United States. That's just a little bit of news you can use. Consumer Reports has given the Lexus GX 460 SUV a very rare don't buy warning, saying a problem that occurred during routine handling tests could lead to a rollover accident in real-world driving. In the latest blow to Toyota's reputation, the magazine said during a test of the vehicle's performance during unusual turns, the rear of the vehicle slid until it was nearly sideways before the electronic stability control system kicked in. In Reykjavik, Iceland, an American Airlines flight with 145 people on board made an emergency landing in Iceland after 5 crew members became ill following reports of chemical fumes in the cabin. American Airlines Flight 49 was traveling from Paris to Dallas-Fort Worth. It landed safely in Iceland. The 5 crew members were in the cooking area of the Boeing 767 when they became ill. Civil protection officials said this in a statement. 8 ambulances and health departments were waiting at the airport. Top banking industry officials say they were skeptical about helping troubled borrowers by forgiving a portion of their debt. The executives are telling lawmakers that they are reducing the amount that troubled borrowers owe to their home loans only in limited cases. That's because consumers who are paying their mortgages on time are likely to see such reductions as being unfair. Sensible drinking can substantially reduce your risk of a stroke, but only if you don't enjoy a cigarette at the same time, according to research. A study of more than 20,000 people in the United Kingdom found that non-smokers who drank moderate amounts were nearly 40% less likely to have a stroke than non-drinkers. But cigarettes were added. This protective effect vanished away. Women who eat diets heavy in certain carbohydrates may be at greater risk of coronary heart disease, according to researchers. A study of more than 47,000 Italian adults found that women alone whose diets contained a lot of bread, pizza, and rice doubled their heart risk. So be on guard on that. Up next, we're going to talk about what I believe is one of the most incredible stories I've ever heard. It's called the Searl effect, and that's next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. I'm George Norrie. I'm going to introduce you now to 2 very special guests. First of all, Bradley Lockerman, best known for his work as a contract player with the CBS daytime series Capital and ABC's General Hospital, while serving as a board member with the Los Angeles County Epilepsy Society. He directed and co-produced the short film A Very Special Year. And Brad created BKL Films and Keepers of the Earth, LLC, for the purpose of bringing this incredible story you're going to hear tonight. It's the John Searl story. It's a DVD to the marketplace. It's credited as he is the writer, director, and executive producer. First of all, here's Bradley Lockerman. Bradley, welcome to the program.
Hello, George. Great to be here with you and that tremendous audience of yours. I guess we gave you another mind bender, huh?
Oh my gosh, this one is unbelievable. Now, also, I'm going to introduce John, but I want you to tell us a little bit. He is partially deaf, is he not?
Yes, sir. Yes, it's when he was born in 1932. He had a very brutal childhood. He was born into poor circumstances, and it was very difficult. Dr. Bernardo's Homes, John will address this, came in and took him and his brother and sister away from the parents, and he was put in foster homes throughout his early life. So what happened was some impacts to his head as a child. And John has trained himself to be able to hear on what he'll explain as two frequencies. Now, he is clinically deaf, but he can discern, and he can use radios and telephones. And you can see in the interview, in the film, he handles that very well. But I'm very direct with him. I sit directly in front of him, and I make sure he can see me. And I just elevate my voice a little. But he'll be fine, George.
Okay. Now, I have interviewed in my career well over 5,000 or 6,000 people. This may very well be one of the most important stories I have ever investigated, that I have ever looked at. Here's John Searl. John claims that he has the solution to our global energy crisis, but it's much more than that. What's more, he says, he's been able to do this for over 60 years. He's regarded by many as the godfather of free energy science. John Searl believes he has found magnetic generators that work. It's called the SearlFX generator. He can save our planet from environmental disaster. Not only that, he can get us to the moon in 1 hour. He can probably get us from Los Angeles to New York in about 10 minutes. Here's John Searl. John, how are you, sir?
Good evening to you. I'm fine, thank you.
John, we are going to, on this program tonight, which goes out to millions of listeners, try to give you the credit that you deserve over all these years. And with your help, Bradley, and your work with the John Searl story, the DVD, maybe we can get more people to understand what John has been doing for more than 40, 50 years. Bradley, first of all, how did you get to know John Searl?
1994, I was in Estes Park, Colorado, with another film company. We had a great big production going on, and I had a day off shooting. I was in the lobby one day, and this fellow with these sky blue, bright eyes boldly stepped up, tapped me on the shoulder, introduced himself, and then told me the wildest story I had ever heard in my life. I mean, after 35 minutes of him speaking, I picked up my jaw. I got my eyebrows from the top of my head to come down, and I said, "You're a movie." And then I realized what I said. He told me about a generator that flies.
And so, it flies indeed.
Yeah. And so from 1994, it was 1996 that I couldn't get this out of my mind. And in 1996, I went over to London, to Middlesex University, and I watched him spellbind an audience as he talked for 10 hours straight about his device, how it works, what it does, specifics, demonstrators, parts, pieces, and then took questions and fielded everything from this audience. And keep in mind, they were pedigreed individuals, physics people, highly educated individuals that came to hear Searl speak.
And it is very possible, Bradley, that from the 60s, most people that have claimed that they have seen UFOs may have been looking at John Searl's devices.
Oh, George, yes. And, George, we've got to touch on that. The Warminster mysteries in particular. We'll get John to address Cookham Hill and the first controlled flights when he really had control over the disc, and he would shoot them over Warminster. And we'll get him to address when he teases the cops. It's a really great piece.
All right, let's bring in John Searl. John and Bradley are with us for 3 hours tonight. We'll take phone calls later with one of the most incredible stories I've ever heard. He has a device he's developed. It works. Bradley will attest to it. John, tell me a little bit about yourself, your background. Let's go way back to the childhood days.
Well, first of all, I was put into a foster home. The shape of the land is very strange, and how the house sits. It is like a strut of the flying machine. The house is placed where the crew department would be. There I had a series of dreams. For 6 years, there was 2 types of dreams. I called them 1 and 2, and they alternated. So you had 1, 2, 1, 2 each year. Always precise. And it was clear to me that there was something wrong with the squares because the game was hopscotch, a set of squares. And I went on my childhood days looking at nature and things, and then I got called up from the Navy to train. I was just 12 years old, and it was there that I came in contact with electricity. I hadn't been in contact with electricity or running water or showers or things of that nature. We just had a bath stuck in front of the fire, and you just bathed, and that was it. And so I was in a new type of life, something I never experienced. And after 2 years, I suddenly became ill. The flesh started to eat away, and in the end, they decided to send me back to my foster home. And I guess they never expected me to return. I healed up there, strange enough, and a number of things happened that are very peculiar. A shed out in the backyard I'd never been in because it's always locked. At this time, as I was sitting outside, the door was ajar, and I went in to see what was in there. And from wall to one end of the wall to the other, we had magazines galore of them. So I pulled out one at random and opened it. I was shocked. There was the wheel in space. Germany calling England, Belgium, and all these other countries to help them to fund this development. It was a John Bull magazine. Mm-hmm. The media told me that John Bull magazine ended in 1929, before I was born. So I could not have possibly seen such a book on a bookshelf anywhere. So the fact that I saw the image of the world in space brought the dreams back to me. But that was, at the beginning of what was going to be the future. As I went back to the naval school, they obviously were concerned about my health and decided I should be discharged. And I went into the electrical rewind company in London to train as an electrical apprentice.
How old were you then, John?
I was just 14.
Jeez, 14. Young. You were like a child prodigy, huh?
I don't know. Let's say I seem to strike lucky in the right places at the right time. I only wish that could happen today.
And you spent a lot of time then, while you were investigating, while you were inventing, you spent a lot of time working for other electrical companies and other manufacturing companies, weren't you?
Correct, yes. Every step of the way was a step towards this technology. Even the medical side that I was employed in was all part of the flying side requirement. And nothing I've done, you can say, is useless for this work. Everything is involved.
And George,
it's so we say, disappointment at every place when I was forced to move on to another job.
All right, go ahead, Bradley.
Yeah, George, I was just going to add that this is a young man who basically could not do mathematics. He could not read. He basically came through the elementary school system lacking these skills. And then as he gained pieces of knowledge through experience, he began to match those with those two dreams that he mentioned. And just to clarify for your audience, the first dream is about a hopscotch game where he's playing the game, and we do a nice depiction of that in the film in GFX. And it has to do with numbers in squares. Your audience will recognize that as magic squares or Sudoku. Mm-hmm. John calls it the law of the squares, and it has to do with the columns, the diagonals, and the rows adding up to a uniform total. This gave him the amounts of the ingredients in his layered elements in the SEG.
You know, he reminds me, Bradley, of Nikola Tesla. Almost in that category.
Yes, indeed. And it was Tesla that was fiddling around with electricity long before they knew what an electron was.
Okay, what was the very first device that you built, John, once you started fidgeting around? Because this all has to do with magnetics, and you experimented with the size, whether they were going to be round or blocks, and you kept trial and error, didn't you?
Yes. We had triangle-shaped magnets. Let's call them magnets for the moment. There were slight differences in how I magnetized them. Mollard Limited made the forms for me. Whatever shape I want, they would press them out for me. And I would then get them magnetized at work and then find out what their effects were. In fact, a few samples were still available when Bradley came and filmed. I'm sure he took some pictures of them, what was left of the early ones. But by toying with them, I discovered a certain behavior pattern. That is, that if the roller was solid, it tended to twist and lock on the bar. And that was the problem. Why did it do that? And I had to toy with that until I realized that maybe the dream showing 8 squares means that you need it in 8 segments. So then I produced them as 8 segments. And then, as John Thomas will confirm in New York, they run dead straight along the bar with no problem, to and fro. They don't fall off, they don't shoot off. So the solid bar locked. And the why it locked was because the magnetic effects I put on that bar was actually a wave, not a magnet system of north and south, as we know magnets. This was something completely different. A load of magnetic bubbles forming a wave, and the roller sits in it and is forced along by the reaction between it and the plate itself. They call it the plate. That's the round circle.
It's incredible, John. And I want everyone to know that whether it was directly or indirectly, and you correct me, Bradley, NASA has contacted John. Everybody seems to be interested in this, but they all seem to shy away from it, and we'll get into those reasons later. But isn't that true, Bradley? Hasn't NASA contacted him?
Oh, yes. We have, there's a fellow in the film that very openly came in and wanted to talk about it. You know, it's not really kind of a super secret thing or anything. We noticed Grumman takes a look, Boeing takes a look, certain rather high official people take a look, and, we're saying, come on in, welcome, come on in, take a look. John wants to talk to everybody.
I think that Edward Leeds Skolnin, I don't know if you're both familiar with this individual who's no longer with us, very frail little man of 120 pounds. He came from Eastern Europe, and he said he knew the secrets of the pyramids built around magnetics and was able to move huge blocks of stone down in Homestead, Florida, and built this incredible array of stone house. It was absolutely incredible. It's called Coral Castle down there.
Oh, yes, with words like resonance and frequency playing a great role.
Absolutely.
That's where John Searl is.
Very similar with what John does. John, how old are you now, sir?
In a few weeks' time, I will be 78.
Well, good for you. And you have been at this since you were a kid. You haven't given up. Tell me this before we go to a commercial break, John Searl. Why haven't you stopped? Why haven't you given up?
Because I realize the dream is telling me there are great problems ahead. We have to have this technology in place or the Earth is doomed. And that's why I have driven this work as hard as I can, given hours every day to it, in the effort to find the solutions, to get them in place so many people will be able to live. Otherwise, they will die. Trouble is, people keep stealing the products, the goods, the equipment from me, just when they think I'm at the top of the hill, that they can own it and they can do it. They can't. They don't understand the mathematics, how it works.
There has been a device called the Levity Disk. They have built many flying craft with the SearlFX generator. It has flown all over the place. Bradley and John will tell us about that when we come back as well. Bradley, steer us to a website. What do you have for us?
www.johnsearlstory.com.
Super, and we've got that linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Back in a moment as we talk about the SearlFX generator. Are you a StreamLink member? Well, you can be for just pennies a day. Just go to coasttocoastam.com and sign up, and you can get past archives, downloads, your iPhone applications, podcasting. They're working on new apps, and also we're working on a system during our StreamLink chat when I'm in Los Angeles, putting up a little webcam for you and audio as well. So they're playing with that for StreamLink members. So go to coasttocoastam.com. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. I'm George Norrie, Bradley Lockerman with us, along with John Searl, as we talk about his incredible invention that he's carried with him for a very long time. Bradley, let's go back to John. So when you put together the John Searl story, and it is critically acclaimed, I'm getting a lot of great response to this.
Thank you.
It must have blown your mind because you did heavy research when you put this together.
Yes, indeed.
You saw this and you said to yourself, what?
Well, the first thing I had to do between 94 and 96 was just really see what was going on and, approach it from my old days when I was a chemistry major before I quit school. And so I had to look at it from as serious a place as I could. But then I also realized that this also had a fantastic side that plays very well in Hollywood. So there were two sides of the coin. But I thought, let's create something where we walk down a very sincere path between the skeptics and the believers and say to everybody that we're going to give you this man and allow him to present his story as it is and as he says in his own words. So it was a very careful thing in between. And what we tried to do, George, is visit the places where events occurred. And I think, John, if we can maybe take you to 1946 at Crawley Road and pick it up there with the landlady.
Yes, the landlady I had was perhaps the most wonderful lady I've ever met. She would spend time holding wires while I soldered the wires on, and when I said switch on, she would say, it won't blow the fuse. No, it won't blow the fuse. Switch on, bang, out go all the light. She would jump to the ceiling and say, I thought you said it won't blow the fuse, but it shouldn't have done. I don't know why. I have to find out. But that's the way they make blades, actual blades, as I showed my knife, which now looked like a blade of an axle, where it had chewed out bits of metal all the way along the blade. Of course, I discovered that the copper I was making windings of at work were actually enamel coated and therefore was insulated. I was using bare copper wire, thinking the wire that I was using was bare. And of course I learned that you don't do things like that.
And John, take it to when you built the first generator and the reaction of the two experiments.
And how big was it too, John? The first one you built.
The first one was just a matter about 9 inches across. The idea was to try to make some small device to produce electricity for the house. And unfortunate scientists and experts said that you can't do this. The rollers wouldn't stay on, the rollers would shoot off. You try to move them, they just shoot off. And all this thing is impossible to print a wave on metal. And so I had it from all angles. But what we found out here, that the rollers would stay on and they would accelerate. And that was the problem. They kept speeding up. And, of course, the material was getting colder and colder. Eventually, it lifted from the table and went to the ceiling and just stuck there. I asked the landlady if she could get a screwdriver. I got up because I had tried to pull it down. I couldn't pull it down, to ram it to stop the rollers, which she did, and then we could pull it down. Then I found that my hands were stuck to the device itself. She had to get warm water to free my hands. So we now had two problems on my hands. A, why did it lift? Experts say it's impossible. Why was it so cold? And that was two major problems that had to be solved. What I believed was the best option was to put a lot more weight on it. Surely that would keep it on the tabletop.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that was wrong. It did the opposite. It made the situation worse. Now it has so much force that it just went through the ceiling and out through the roof. Ceilings are stressed for load above them, downwards, not upwards, not load upwards. Roofs are stressed for outer pressure on them and not for an internal pressure.
John, did it take off like a rocket, or did
yes,
it just...
Okay. Yep, there was no hesitation. It went through the ceiling and the roof, no problem, and just hover out there. But then another problem turned up. The static, we only had long-wave radio in those days. You had a long aerial running out the garden.
Yeah.
Everybody had these aerials, and the static coming from it overload the capacitor of the aerial area, and the whole set would turn on at full blast. You couldn't turn them off. And, of course, I wasn't very much liked. Because the whole street was a dim and noise. And in any case, we did discover in the end why that was.
And, John, what happened to that unit?
Well, both that one and, well, in fact, 5 more after that one, we simply lost. They just went straight up. Just up. And according to Newton's law, unless some force acts upon it to change that state, it will continue in a straight line. And we have to accept that Newton is right, that it's still going strong somewhere.
Now, this SearlFX generator that you built then, it was about 9 inches, but then you started building bigger ones and bigger ones. How come, John? Why did you want to increase the size?
Well, I need to know more about the behavior as you enlarge it. A number of things worried me. That is that Africa needed a lot of financial help, and the key reason was that they never had the power to do things for themselves. If I could produce a unit that could be portable and dropped into places in Africa, they would now have energy, and eventually they would need less and less financial support as they could support themselves. Again, I was looking at other problems. I could see that the future was going to have a lot of pollution problems. And I wrote to government officials, even American officials, that I predicted that we would have a lot of pollution problems from our systems. We have to develop a cleaner system. And this generator had the promise of doing that. All I got back was good luck. And good luck.
Just
the
good
only
luck,
man
right?
that I must admit, one president that really did try was President John Kennedy. He did try to get Edward Air Force Base to fund the work for me.
Really? Tell me what happened. And I assume once he was assassinated, that all stopped?
Yeah,
what happened?
all stopped. I must also say that Bill Clinton, as president, also wrote personally back wishing us good luck. And I wrote to him a letter which was put to music and sent to him. So he had the hard copy and the musical CD. A lovely piece of music, and it's actually on my website for all to hear. So you can hear what I said to the president and also the music that went with it.
Let me ask you this, John, and then we're going to get into some of these devices that you built, and I want you to explain to us, and with Bradley, the potential where people thought these were flying saucers. Do you believe that companies like Boeing or Lockheed or all other huge aeronautical companies may be working on a similar idea that they have? I'm not going to say they stole your idea, but that they're working on the same principle?
Well, let me make it clear. I did investigate Canada, and I discovered that the saucer-shaped objects that they built. They built two. It was the American Air Force and the Canadian Air Force worked together to develop them. In fact, the two are idle, and one is still available, but they say it's too costly to fix. I wouldn't mind having that one and see what we could do with it.
Yeah. Now, are we talking about a principle because we're using magnetics and it's creating some kind of a force field? Are we talking about inverse gravity? Is that what this is?
Yes. What appears to happen is that the gravity is absorbed and then is rejected out of the vehicle, and that gives us two conditions that are equal. That is, they're both the same particles. So therefore, they will reject each other and not attract each other. So we inverse gravity and we get lift.
Amazing. Well, Bradley, it's an incredible story, isn't it?
Indeed, it is. And let's go. John, address for George and his audience the first six that Mr. Haynes financed for you.
Yes. George happened to be a person I lodged with. He was dying of cancer. And every night I would go to his bedroom at 8 o'clock to hear him listen to the broadcast from Rome, from the Pope. And after it finished, he would ask me what was my interest. And I explained to him about this device, that it can fly. I should give it a body, develop it. And he said to me, John, if you can make people look up in the sky, I will pay the cost to do it. For everybody always looking down at the ground. So I said, right, fair enough. So he called his son and told him to take me to the market on Wednesday where they were selling government products and select everything I needed. So he got the shed and all the bits and pieces I needed to make a magnetizer and materials for the craft. And all went well. Well, we constructed the shed and that. The problem came is when we launched the first one. That again hovered, and of course that upset the neighbours because all their radios came on. On the fifth one, a chap took shots at me, and the police went and investigated, and he said he was shooting me because I was frightening his pigeons.
Oh my gosh!
So, but every time I used to go up to the room and said, I'm afraid I've lost it. Did the people look up? Oh, yes, they looked up all right. Build another one, John.
On some of the units, John, that you say you lost, where'd they go? I mean, are they out beyond the solar system?
Carry on in space.
So they're just, and I bet they keep going, don't they?
They just keep going. I said, there's no way for them to stop.
That's one of the problems. One of the problems you had in the beginning. You couldn't control where they went, could you?
No, I couldn't do nothing about it because there was no technical books anywhere that would explain such behavior patterns.
And John, tell George and his audience about the shear pin. You tried to actually tie one down, did you not?
Yeah, those six, we did try, well, not the first one, but all the remaining five, we tied down, starting with a small shear pin. That snapped, and the craft went free. The next one, we tried larger, and the last one should have withstood 60 tons of stress, but that also sheared. So we had another problem on our hands. Why did these ties shear for? They shouldn't have done.
And, John, that was probably a breakdown. You found out later a breakdown in the molecular structure as opposed to other things, yes?
Yes. Unfortunately, the force disturbed the structure of the atoms and made the pin very weak, and it just sheared.
John, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, George. And, John, this was leading up to control of the disc in the late 50s, correct?
That's correct. Lots of accidents happen. I call them accidents. They wasn't expected to happen. I was using a soldering line to solder wire on a unit, and I couldn't solder. And I felt the pin, the bit, and it was cold. So I put it back to warm up again. Came out, the same thing happened. So I got a new soldering line out, plugged in, and that did the same. Then I began to realize that there was something strange here. This unit was cold, making the iron cold, so it couldn't solder. Therefore, the SEG does become very cold due to the fact that it's putting in so many electrons in that the space between electron and electron is so small that it cannot produce the charge between themselves. So therefore, the temperature is going down and down. The more you pack these electrons in, the colder it became.
Do you need an external power source to keep it revolving, John?
No more. No. Take your fingers out the way when you release the first roller.
Or you could lose your finger, right?
Yeah, you lose your fingers, all right.
So this could be powered by itself. It's self-contained. It generates its own power now.
Yeah.
If there's life in outer space, and that they're more advanced than us, we've always wondered what their propulsion system would be, because it's not what we know right now. It's not what we have. Could it be this kind of a system?
Well, the only system I can see is this magnetic drive system, where you can produce immense voltage, and you've got the power on board. Not something you have to fill up before you take off, and then you run out of fuel somewhere along the line. Now, if intelligent life exists and they need to move about, they couldn't do it with conventional petrol, gasoline, or any other chemical system.
Not at all. And ultimately, in the next hour, we'll talk about the flying machines. What was the biggest machine that you made, generator?
It was 41 inch in diameter. Starship Searl was to be the biggest, but the funds failed to come in. That would be 1,000 feet in diameter.
John, I think you misspoke. I think you said 41 inch. How big was that? 41?
Yes, inch, sorry. 41 feet.
Feet.
In diameter. Yeah.
You were going to experiment with flying people in these things, right?
But that was the idea, to design a man-carrying vehicle. I need to know the difference of effects between one size and the next. What I found, the bigger they are, the better they are.
Was there any possibility that the machine could break, let's say, while you were in midair?
No. Now, you see, the whole structure is in uniform motion. Therefore, none of this materials around us, which is in random, would affect it.
Okay.
And this is the beauty. That's why you can move to Mars in 2 months with no trouble.
And there's no friction with the machinery, so the pieces aren't hitting each other.
Sound.
You developed it over time. You used even some special material found on this planet. We'll talk about that when we come back. Incredible. Bradley Lockerman, John Searl, our special guest tonight. We'll be right back with both of them in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, it's called the Searl effect. And when we come right back, we're going to talk about why so many people have seen things that they think have been UFOs, but they were John Searl's flying machines. We'll find out about that in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Bradley and John, let's get into the story of why people have been looking at this thinking that they're UFOs and they have not been, and then why it's been so difficult to get this kind of technology up and running. Bradley, let's talk a little bit about what people have seen in the United Kingdom area and what they've thought. What's been going on?
Yeah, what I asked John early on when he was telling me the story, the specifics of this area is when he learned to control it, and we'll get John to address that in a moment, but then he built several different types of structure, because what they said to him was basically it won't support itself and it won't fly. John, how many flight vehicles were there?
Altogether, there was 41, and there would have been more had the finance kept coming in.
And they ranged in size from
3 feet to 31 feet, and the biggest one we allowed the press to watch was a 21 foot, which was called the Demo 1.
And John, share with the audience how you controlled these.
Well, you can't control them with the normal model radio controller. You need ham operators.
Ham radio operators.
Yes.
Okay.
Because they travel too fast, they turn too sharp. So you'll cover a large area very quick. From London to Cornwall, you take about 3 minutes to cover that run. No hand model radio control could cope with that.
How would the ham operators work with this, John?
Well, what they do, they're given codes. They're asked to get the same equipment as I'm using, which was the 1144 and the 1155 setup, which was a Marconi construction. And these had color dials. Now, I would tell them what color to move and what figure to turn it to get control of the vehicle as it passes. Their job was to make sure that it passed in front of them, not behind them. So they would correct the flight path if it was needed. Somehow, one day, the craft got over Blackbush Airport and caused a bit of trouble.
Yeah, tell the audience about that one, John.
Yeah, well, what happened was, it was a Sunday. I got a call from Blackbush Airport asking me if I kindly remove my flying machine as it was blocking out calls, radio calls from incoming aircraft. And this we did. They said they would tell the press about this. And, of course, the press rang me later to say that Blackbush had phoned you about removing your craft because it was causing a blackout on radio. And I told them, yes, I removed it. They said, well, this will be in the article tomorrow. So I got the papers and was surprised. It said a UFO blocked out radio communications with incoming aircraft. Now, that's strange. UFO. They knew what it was. The airport knew what it was.
And, John, they never mentioned your name from that point forward. They always described it as a UFO, UFO?
Always a UFO. So somebody have told them to cut it out, cut it off. Do not brag about Searl's achievements. Keep that quiet.
Sorry, George. John, share with the audience the P11 and P12 flights when you were photographing one to the other.
Yeah. You see, every model we set up, we knew what the underneath looked like. We never knew what the top looked like. So we decided that when we launched the P11, we'd take the P12 up with cameras and have a look at what's going on top. And there we got a surprise. Because as our photo shows, that the top was very brilliant light, and the underneath is basically black. And this is the material is a moss green of the shell. So that's strange that you get this image. Now we got now we know that amount of energy is coming into the top of the machine, which we had predicted really had to happen. But what we was more surprised about the P11, as it crossed over the top of trees, the underneath became a military camouflage appearance. Why could this happen? this is moss green. And the only solution I can give to that is that we have an electric mirror under the craft. Because even as the craft approaches black clouds, it shows up as a purpley coloured rim, gradually getting darker towards the middle. And that is strange because you don't see any purple effect on the clouds as you look at them. So we have a mirror image coming to us.
And John, address the events near Warminster. What was the name of the hill that you used to fly off of?
Yeah, it's called Clubben Hill. It was one of the main hills. There were other points just outside Warminster. That was very handy.
And what year did that take place in those years?
Well, the years we started really testing was from 1956 through, and we really end up what we call playing with the public in 1968 time.
All right.
Where we just stopped fooling about with the public. When I say fooling about, we try to find out how the public react when they come face to face with something they don't understand.
No, and what happened at Warminster?
What happened? Well, I read a UFO book sent to me which involved a particular winding lane between the main road through and back again to the main road. So I thought on Sunday, let's go down and find a spot to place the craft. And we went round a bend, we placed it there. Now, anyone coming in, driving in this lane for a little bit, do whatever they fancy they're going to do there, the quiet spot, would come face to face with the disc, the slender disc, and want to see what happened. Well, the results are surprising. You hear the gears grinding as they reverse out to back out on the main road as fast as possible. We took Sunday because Sundays are normally not very busy on the roads. So we felt that if they did back out quick, there wouldn't be a problem of an accident. And this is the result we saw time and time again. When they see something strange, which goes against their plans, they get the hell out of it.
Yeah.
And that also applies to people. For one Sunday on the way back to Newbury, I saw a nice sloping hill. It was interesting because a tractor and trailer was coming down it, but there was no driver on the tractor. So where was the driver? He was walking beside the trailer, throwing the straw on the ground for the sheep that were following. So I thought to myself, well, let's see how he would behave. Surely he wouldn't leave the tractor. Well, I was wrong. Once he saw the shadow circle above him, he eventually looked up. And when he did, he dropped the fork and he ran, not for the tractor, but away up the hill, leaving the tractor to continue down the hill to the ditch. I decided it was time to get out of there. What I wish I was at the other end to see how he explained why he had no tractor with him.
And the cops, John?
And the cops, well, because cops are trained to investigate things, and the question is, would they investigate anything that was strange in the way of a flying object? So we teased them, and every time they stopped, we stopped. And every time they went to get a closer look, we moved on. So the police did honor their training. They did investigate or try to investigate what the object was. What they drew for the press was, without question, the IGV.
And just to help you, George, and your audience, when John says IGV, the disc itself was originally a slender disc or a levity disc, and later on, as John understood the craft itself, he renamed it the IGV, or Inverse Gravity Vehicle.
Okay. All right. Now, By any chance, were you ever at Rendlesham, John, with one of these devices?
Sorry.
John, he said Rendlesham, which was the event, the UFO event in the UK. Were you with flying the disc in the Rendlesham area?
Yes. In fact, to be quite honest, we flew it in many places just to make sure how the public react. Most public were scared and called it the thing. It became a common term, the thing.
Did it ever create invisibility, John, at all, by any chance?
But if it traveled fast enough, you wouldn't see it. It'd be too fast for your eye to see. Therefore, it would not be visible.
What created its speed?
But it's the amount of output that you develop. What's happening here, we are building up immense energy, and then we are partly grounding it, and photons shoot out. And the photons are what you actually see, the glow. And this level of glow, whether it's green, blue, white, or what it is, gives you the idea, the amount of power we raised the unit to before we grounded it to the pins that you see just protruding outside the rim of the craft. The greater the power we release, then the greater is the force that's acting on the vehicle. But basically, what is happening is the inertia of space that pushes it along.
Did it make a noise when it was,
No, it don't make no noise. It's a silent. The only noise it makes is while it's on the coming in to land, leaves start to rotate, and you've got this noise of a whirlwind effect. Again, for takeoff, you've got the same problems. The leaves and that start to circle, and this gives you that wind. What we say, like a gale blowing, but nothing worse than that.
This could be used for flying. It could be used for automobiles. It could be used to power your own house, could it not?
Yes. In fact, I've recently been to Miami to talk to a company. We are still talking. My comrade, head engineer, has been to Canada to meet groups there to set up a base. Again, is meeting people in California to also consider setting up work there. So I'm coming to America to make it happen, to make America greener than it's ever been, to turn those deserts green that there haven't been for 1,000 years. We have the know-how, we have the technology. What we don't have is you. That's the missing ingredient. When we got you, these wonderful things can happen.
Well, that's absolutely true, and just marvelous. Now, when we come back at the half, I want to talk with both of you about why it hasn't been made yet. And we'll go through some of the problems you've faced, John, trying to get this made and everything else. But do you think, is it possible that the Egyptians, when they built the pyramids, or whoever built the pyramids, possessed this kind of technology?
Well, to be honest, yes, they had to have some technology. Let's put it this way. I think our education system has gone backwards compared to those years. To build pyramids like that would call for real understanding of nature, real understanding of forces, to be able to assemble such devices. This is why I say if we are confused how they were done, what about if we turn the deserts green in America? What would the children question? How did we do it? But if we got it all on film, they're better to see how it's done.
Well, absolutely. Bradley, it's remarkable, isn't it?
It is absolutely remarkable. And I just want to say to your audience, George, please be patient with our servers. I know that Coast is such a powerful show, and I just got a note here that our server's working overtime, so please be patient out there. Yes, George, it is an absolute stunner and a continual mind bender. I love to hear from people far more educated than myself to get to the fundamentals of what John is saying, because I think what we need to do is bridge the language that John Searl uses, but bridge it from the point of view of physics today or quantum mechanics today, and maybe step forward with the idea of plausibility and approach John Searl from that angle.
I think so too. John, are you happy that you've invented this? I know there have been some frustrating moments.
It's sad that all these years have passed, and every time I reach the top of the hill, that somebody in the group steals the technology to block me because they want to own it. That's a problem. But the thing about the flying machine, what we got to bear in mind is that the minimum velocity required to escape the pull of the Earth's gravity field is approximately 11.18 kilometers a second. But to reach Mars, we need 11.44 kilometers per second because the sun pulls satellites in. In the IGV case, we'll be pushed out by the sun, but we will need the extra velocity to counteract the pushing out effects so we can reach our destination on time, which is aimed at 2 months.
You know, remember the old Star Trek films where Captain Kirk yelled back to Scotty, let's go to warp drive. Can you do that with this?
Thing.
It's like that, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, man, that's something else. Well,
so you see, it's not such a lot of power you want. It is for rockets because you got to carry fuel. But for the IGV, that's not a problem. It has all its fuel on board. It produces it from the fabric around itself.
To create a flying device to fly 400 people from Los Angeles to New York in just minutes, how big would the device need to be? How big would the flying craft need to be?
Well, the flying craft would be at least 69 feet radius.
Okay. It'd have to be at least that big. And for 300 people, probably a little bigger than that.
Yeah.
But in terms of your generator, how big would that be?
That would just be inside. So if you're talking a 65 or 68 feet diameter, you're looking at about 3 feet in. Now, the reason why you've got to get it as near to the rim as you can is that you cannot control it from inside the inner side. You have to control it from the outside of the generator. Any impact on the outside immediately dips it to its new angle, which is normally 15 degrees.
We're going to talk about why it hasn't been perfected yet, why it hasn't been built when we come back. Well, it's called the John Searl story. His life, his machine, his words. It's a documentary on the extraordinary life of John Roy Robert Searl. This man has the answer to the energy crisis. It's right here. Let's find out why nobody's picking up on it when we come back on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. We've got Bradley Lockerman, John Searl. Bradley, tell me the venue for the DVD. It's out. It's available. Is it going to be played anywhere or just for the home use?
Yes, indeed. John will be speaking at Leeds University in the UK this August, and they will release it as a premiere at Leeds in a theater. And we've talked about doing that. We think it's a wonderful idea because, of course, John is British and his heart and soul is as an Englishman. So we're looking forward to that in August. So it will be at a screening there, and hopefully we'll have multiple screenings at Leeds.
Well, that sounds pretty impressive, John. You excited about that?
Oh, yes. To, again, lecture in a top educational place is good.
John, let's talk a little bit about John F. Kennedy and his interest in this device. How did that come about? What happened?
Well, what happened was that a lady in New Zealand named Mrs. Comer wrote to him about the IGV and the SEG. And it seems that he was taken up with the interest in this and wrote me direct. And in fact, a number of letters took place between us. He was interested to get support and help to develop this work. And unfortunately, the Air Force Base people, the scientists, returned the goods to say that they are sorry they couldn't help to fund it because it showed no signs of inertia. This is outside their understanding. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's no inertia. Surely, a sensible person will realize that if you release a roller to be able to free to move, and it immediately gets to its its cruising speed without acceleration being seen, then there can't be much inertia, if any, there. And surely that is simple to understand.
Now let's move ahead. You've had this device. You've got it perfected. It's been working. You can use it, as you said, in cars, experiment in planes, use it. Every home could have it to electrically generate power for their home. Why hasn't a major utility bought the rights for you? Or why hasn't a major airline company who manufactures planes, why haven't they bought the rights from you?
Well, the motor industry, all of them replied saying that they could not see a magnetic-driven system in this century, filling the gaps of petrol and that. So we had the problem there that they could not understand that this magnetic system was not a normal magnetic system. Regarding the energy side, domestic side, the British section of the Government Inventions Unit did tell the press they knew all about it. They thought it was a novelty. Of course, they couldn't see a small unit producing a mass amount of power, because they knew that it took giant generators to produce electricity. And therefore, to see the two items, they could not possibly see that being developed to power a city. So it's what we say, they're brainwashed to a particular concept, and anything different to that won't work. But they did agree. They knew about it, and that it was real.
Is it possible that they didn't believe you?
Well, they had to believe what they see, but they didn't believe that you could produce that sort of power for a city from such a concept.
From something so small.
Yeah, this is the problem.
And they wouldn't even experiment with it?
No. They would sooner put nuclear power stations in or coal power stations in than to look into this technology. Now, I think the biggest problem is they do not want to lose the support of the energy people when it comes to the voting. They fund a lot of money into their accounts to help them to tackle the next election. They don't want to lose that. And the media, I think, changed their song from John Searl to UFOs because they were afraid of losing the energy power adverts, which brought in their biggest amount of revenue.
Why can't we, Bradley, get Richard Branson from his Virgin Airlines to do this? Why can't we get Bill Gates to help fund something?
Oh, goodness. Let's give him a shout-out right now. John has had contact with some rather important people over the years, and I'll address this way. There's a beautiful line. My favorite John Searl line in the entire film is when he's standing in front of his home in Mortimer, where all of this was centered 5 miles from Aldermaston, the Los Alamos of Great Britain. He says a really wonderful line that sums up his life, and that is that he says, once they see it, they want to own it. And that's been his problem all of his life. And he encapsulates it in greed and ignorance, which constantly has surrounded this man through his life. John, you want to address that?
Yes. The trouble seems that once they realize the till figures, the dollars that were going to the till, they want to own it. And basically, let's be frank, my trip just recently to Miami is presenting the same image. They want to own it if they're going to support it. And I'm afraid I have to protect the technology so that the whole world gets it, not any particular group. So we are still discussing how we can solve this problem, that they cannot own it, but they can be involved in the development of it, which will give them a reasonable good return on their investment.
And George, if I may, John, address for George and his audience the patent situation. What happened there?
Well, back in the 63, when they saw the patent application, they rang me up to say, never patent this. This is a know-how, and you must not give that away. And just then last year, my back in England and the solicitor talked to the patent people, and again they said that you couldn't patent it. Then we decided, when the mock-up arrived here, to take the mock-up and meet them personally with the solicitor and the backer. And they saw the demonstration, and they said, yes, you can patent it, you can fill the application in now. But bear in mind that the patent details will be made public, and somebody will have to make it to be able to get a full patent. And if your interest is in the planet, then do not patent it. It's a know-how. Never patent a know-how.
What do you think of that?
Well, at least that's the only way you can protect the system, because, as they said to me, you own it if you don't patent it, because you're the one who knows how to do it. As long as you keep that a secret, you're safe. But if you patent it, the whole world can get it, and those evil people who stole the equipment there will go to the bank laughing. They've now got the missing bit that's blocked them from doing it.
Let me ask you this, John, and I'm not going to ask you for the specifics, obviously, but is there an obvious secret to this device that most people just don't know or understand that you have worked on and perfected over all these years?
Yes. People don't understand it because they're educated in yesterday. This is the trouble. The general public are today. They're not interested about yesterday and really not tomorrow. Scientists are yesterday people. They develop and they know all about where the person was born, their parents and that. Inventors are a special group of people who see the future, and they bring the future out into reality. If it wasn't for them, life would be just one continuous day, just with season changes, like it is with all other animals on planet Earth.
Well, that's true. That's true. Are you disappointed, Bradley, that he hasn't been able to get this sold?
Well, I'm as frustrated as anyone else, having studied it for this length of time. There are two things involved with the Searl effect. There's what John talks about in the device and what he's learned over the years, the Searl effect within a device, but there's also another effect, and I've noticed that it's an emotional effect. People observe it or study it or look at it, and it's almost a confounding thing in your own mind to think, this may be a panacea, this may be a paradigm-shifting unit that's going to take us from there to the future, and there's a frustration in that. And I've experienced it myself, and I see it in other people. It often takes the shape of a very contentious debate on different sites when they talk about Searl. You have the bomb throwers come in and the name callers, et cetera, et cetera. But that's my experience with it. I like bringing him on your show here, George. I invite, and I look forward to the people that are far more educated than me to step forward and examine these fundamentals. This is what John is saying. Let's really see if this thing does work.
Didn't Tesla Motors receive some TARP money or something? I think they did.
Yes, recently, and we'd love to say hello to them and introduce them to John. It's like we're doing with your audience. We put John up front when he speaks at Leeds, when he does this conference in New Mexico, the Extraordinary Technology Conference in the end of July. Put him up front and, have at him.
John, where would you manufacture if you had a big plant?
Well, anywhere in America, we have been talking to a number of companies. In fact, we are meeting them to discuss how we move forward. America needs this technology.
Absolutely. I'm in shock, John, that the Chinese haven't approached you yet. Maybe they have.
Well, they have just recently. They want me to go and lecture for 7 days in Beijing.
They're going to keep you.
Oh, they will. They love me.
Well, that's a possibility, Bradley. They've got all the money now. They may go ahead with this.
Well, I understand that's a great place to find neodymium, which is at the core of John's system. And, if they're that forward-looking, my goodness, we used to be. And, frankly, I would bet most of us still are. And I think that's a situation that John's been looking for. He really wants to come here. But like I say, his heart and soul is an Englishman. And he just looks forward especially to addressing his fellow countrymen in the UK.
John, you say we could get to the moon in about an hour?
Oh, yes. It's just a bus trip for the IGV. As I've stated already, the minimum force needed to get away from the Earth's gravity field is approximately 11.18 kilometers a second. The craft can travel and 10 times that with no trouble. That's the International Space Station is just a bus ride, let's be honest. And the moon is nothing more than a bus ride.
And I guess you could seal the craft from the Van Allen belt and everything else, right?
Oh, yes. You see, the trouble is, it works on a very simple, it's the mass and the velocity that it moves at, that when an object is arriving towards it, if it's greater mass and velocity to the object coming towards it, the object is forced away from it. If the object coming towards it is greater in mass and velocity, then the craft is forced away. So there's a bow wave around the vehicle that protects it.
And you say Mars, a couple months?
2 months only. No matter where it is, we just the speed, the velocity we need, and we'll do it in 2 months. That is the speed I feel best suited for the commercial development of space.
How much do you think it would take to get this up and running, to build a prototype of, let's say, a car with this device?
That's where we are talking to a company in America on that issue. I want to produce a car to travel from east to west and back non-stop. That means you've got to have 4 drivers, 2 control points.
Yeah.
So that you've got to have sleeping quarters, you've got to have all the food, all the water, and sewage to be dealt with on the vehicle, so you don't have to stop.
Almost like an RV, sort of,
yep.
Right? Or recreational vehicle. And what do you think a device like that would cost?
Well, I suppose that it would cost us about $35,000 to have a decent machine made that is comfortable for the 4 people to sleep and live and cook and do their meals. And I would like to see the cooperation of the law enforcement units to clear the way for us, that we can communicate with them so that they can see the areas clear for us to pass through, so we can try to do the run to win the speed record.
Oh, all right. You're going to go fast too, then.
Yes. We want to see 200 or more miles per hour.
Now, in theory, this generator would last forever, right?
Oh, yes, because there's no wear or tear. And the beauty about it, as the magnetic rolls are revolving, it is reprinting on the plate and on itself the magnetic information. So it's never lost.
I could just see the recall. The device is being recalled because it makes the driver disappear.
Yes.
You never know. But, I mean, it would minimize repairs. You know, you wouldn't have to bring your car in for a tune-up all the time.
Let's face it, with a car, you would only have to compress it to check the electric motors on the wheel every 2 years to just make sure that they're okay. What I was thinking of the particular vehicle concept would be that the first couple of four wheels to be in a caterpillar system. You would have the high speed. The reason for that is if you hit ice, you'll be able to cope. You'll still be able to move at speed without losing control.
And I guess you've never teamed up, John, with a really sophisticated investment banker, right?
You're right.
I think if you were able to do that, one of the big boys, then just have them go ahead and raise the funds, maybe start as a private company. I think you could get this up and running.
Yes. Well, the door's open to all these big companies, security, government officials. They're welcome to come in. They don't have to spy on me. Just come and have a chat.
Well, like you said years ago, when you had your flying devices, the IGV, you invited the media in to film it, right?
Yes.
And it's been in newspaper articles. Bradley, I remember in the documentary, the John Searl story, you had a lot of clippings from newspapers.
Yes, indeed. And they were quite widespread, all the way down to New Zealand, through Japan and Australia, through Europe, in the UK, of course. John, you remember the letter from Major George Uhlig in 1976. Tell George and his audience about that letter.
Well, let's get that when we come back in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM, and it'll be your final hour, so we'll open up the phone lines as well. Okay, this hour we will take your phone calls with our two special guests, John Searl and Bradley Lockerman, as we talk about the John Searl story on Coast to Coast AM. And Bradley, you were talking about some letter or that John received earlier before the break?
Yeah, it was from Major Uhlig in the Air Force in 1976. You'll see that in the film, and we'll get John to address it. And maybe, George, these are the more sensational aspects of the SEG. Perhaps we can steer him into telling your audience about the health aspects. Now, keep in mind, this can be a unit for your home that you put in your home. You power everything electrically in your home, independent, off the grid. And there are health aspects with this SEG running in your home, in particular with burn victims and its ability to ionize things. So, John, the letter from Major Uhlig in 76, and then the health aspects.
Right, yes. The letter in question, the Major came to London to collect all the evidence that I had to offer regarding the technology, and took back to Edward Air Force Base for the scientists there to investigate. This was done on the request of John F. Kennedy when he was the president. Mm-hmm. And the result from this research and study was that they regretted that they could not help to fund the work because it had no signs of inertia, which went against their understanding. So what they were saying to me, that unless the subject is in that cardboard box, they're not interested in it, no matter what you claim.
They didn't understand it, did they?
No, didn't understand it. That just beat them how this could function as it did. The other point I'd like to bring up while we're on this question of these experts is that one day we had a scientist from Oldham Marston's Atomic Works. He came to discuss about writing an article in their journal to ask everyone in the area to subscribe so much a week to the funds there to pay for me to stop all work and work on this technology. I had Reverend George Nixon with me as a witness. I asked him to come as a witness. And during this talk, everything was going well. And suddenly there was a news flash on the TV, which was not in my best interest, because it was the Air Commodore of Great Britain, a special message that they had seen this particular event, and they asked me to return it, or when would it return, and I said 7 days from now, next Sunday. They said, I don't believe you, you're lying. I repeated it again, and in the end I said, look, you stay here and find out. And they said, that's what we'll do. And apparently they did, because on Thursday at 3 p.m. our time, this emergency notice came up, and the Air Commodore announced that they were now going to pack up and leave, because clearly the craft was not going to return until Sunday, and therefore if John Searl came out in the open, he would overrule the Americans and the Russians while he's turning knobs, and that they were wondering who was doing what. And that if they never married this technology, when Searl hit the marketplace, they would be completely lost. And that's not the only person said that. Dr. I forgot his name now. That came. He also wrote the same letter to NASA. He came from NASA.
John, that would be Dr. Arthur Kane, yes?
Yeah, Dr. Kane, Arthur Kane. He wrote this article to his bosses that if they did not marry this technology, they would be completely out of the running when Searl hit the marketplace. Now, that's one of their own men telling them that, who spent 2 weeks with me studying and watching the experiments. And he agreed that the model he watched would reach the moon in less than 9 hours. Now, he's basing it on just the local demonstration I was given, because they want the space to really speed it up to show that it could do it in the hour. But even at just under 9 hours, that still was fast to get to the moon.
And John, now as a power unit for the home, address the health aspects. Should you have one installed in your home?
Well, I can say from experience that having the SUG in your home to power your home makes the rooms negative, not positive, as your power systems do at this time. And I found that negative state is a much healthier state, especially when the steam hits your hands. It's a terrific stinging sensation. The skin is raw and sore. I found that my hand cooled very quick nearby the machine and healed very fast. And in fact, during all the 30 years I was running one, I never really suffered from anything. The air you breathe is like drinking fresh spring water. And I'm not the only person who said that. To other people who had SUG to help them, because the doctors had given them a short time to live, also made the same statement to me. It was like drinking pure spring water, cool and lovely. You want more and more of it. And John, that was the feeling I got.
And John, just one more thing to address address for George and his audience, the neutralizing of nuclear material. How does that work?
That nuclear material means that it's loss of neutrons, and therefore it's highly radioactive. On a demonstration back then, 1968, scientists brought in strontium-90 for me to test. Mm-hmm. and there was a little tube. They showed what the readings were before it went into the center of the ECG. After 5 minutes, they took it out and showed that the reading of it was less than the wristwatch they were wearing. They'd also used a sample of uranium and put that in, and the same effect. The reading was less than the wristwatch he was wearing, which showed clearly that if we made a really big, powerful unit, we could neutralize the waste. So it might be much cheaper to bundle all the waste onto a Liberty disc or inverted vehicle, whichever you like to call it, and shoot the stuff into Jupiter to deal with.
Let's go to some calls here. Let's go to Wayne, first of all, in Halifax, Pennsylvania, east of the Rockies. Wayne, you're on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
How you doing, John? And George.
Hi.
Now, my question is, when it's going so fast, how do you control it and stop it?
Well, the engine itself, you never stop. Even in a car, the SG continues to run. You just got to switch off the power to the motors. The same with the craft. We drop the power till we eventually touch the ground. Then we shut it off. We don't shut it off completely. We can't. It just carry on running. But what we mean by shutting off, we're not discharging any energy from the vehicle. It's just cruising.
Yeah. Now, with magnets, what can you use like that? They do in cranes with a magnet, so they hit a switch and then drop the metal. You control it, off and on like that.
But it depends how you're using it. If you're using it as a domestic power unit, then you just don't have to worry about it. You just carry on using your tools, the same as using your mains. And for the motor cars, it's basically just the same. You just turn off the power to the motors, but the generator carries on running.
All right.
It's basically a converter. It converts all the energy around itself, in the fabric around itself, into uniform motion. And you can then use that as real electrical energy.
How come you never gave up, John? You kept pushing.
I never gave up because I know the state of the world ahead of me was going to be extremely bad. Pollution would be terrible. Not only that, we are destroying so much of the earth, and we will pay the price in death for that. And I need to try to stop that happening.
Next up, we go to Quartz Hill, California. Jeff, there you are. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, I just wanted to first say I think this is one of the greatest guests you've ever had on. I think this is awesome. And what I wanted to say really was more of a thought, I guess. I've always wondered how come since the early 50s or whatever, we've had the same technology in aircraft, meaning like the fastest airplane we've had since then has been the SR-71. And to me, it seems common sense that our own governments would keep this technology hidden from us, because then they'd put oil companies out of business and all that. And I could fully understand that you would have a tough time getting this technology out. I guess that's it.
You're correct. That is the major problem.
Yeah.
Earlier, you said, Bradley and John, that he had this dream of, hopscotch, and he's bouncing around on these blocks. How did that figure into the invention?
Well, that was very interesting. Everything was saying that if you did not do this, stop, think, and act, then all these children you see, their children will never reach the age to reproduce. The situation would be so bad they'll just simply die. So I have to do that. The trouble was, always with squares, and this is what I said in the early newsletters. Why always squares? Why not triangles or circles or some other shape? that before you can load a shell, the H1 must go into the next shell to be created, and then the shell before can load up. It also tells you two more important issues. There are always two prime states in everything, and there are opposite and reverse. That is true. Whatever you look at, that is true, especially when you look at yourself. There it is in the mirror, no ifs or buts. And again, everything within you follows the same rules. So the question was, when I started training as electrical engineer, the ticket I was given for the stores had cable ordered to, and above the back of it a little small too. So I asked the foreman, what does that mean? He said it's 2 squares. What is 2 squares? So he really drew a square divided into 4, 2 by 2. So I said, well, surely each square has a value. Oh, no. Now, it's just a formula we use. So that played on my mind. Squares. The dream always had squares. What is something? The 3 is marked. So I investigated this, and it's true. 3 is the leading edge of the squares. Why is 1 and 2 not used? Well, I discovered that 1 is the DNA for bacteria and viruses, and normally a lot of other products, trees and plants. While square 2 relates to us and all living things that have to move. So now I realize that we're dealing with a DNA. So the squares have a structure, therefore it has a function. Therefore, each square must have a DNA factor to it. And it was finding this that led me into the full picture of the dreams and led me to developing the SEG.
And I just, John, I just wanted to interject here that the squares, in fact, the 4x4 square, is a mathematical principle that is 5,000 years old. And John, share with George and his audience, I think there was a story about the Austrian monks that wrote to you.
Yes. The Austrian monks been buying the monthly issue of Space and Time from Germany, and each month issue was about 10 pages about my technology. And as I studied the law of the squares, I suddenly realized they knew this. And they looked through their records and found parchments. But because the parchments have deteriorated so much, they were not able to follow all the context. But now they could see the answers. They told me that the technology you're working from is last known use was 5,000 years ago by an Indian tribe. And that interested them.
Interesting. Let's go to Luke, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Go ahead, Luke.
Hi, everybody. I'm very excited to talk to you on John Searl. I've studied your work over the years, and I'm very excited to share with you that I work with vector space geometries and the cube. I've worked for many years with the square and the cube, and I believe the 3 creative forces are your 2 horizontals and your vertical. And what you're tapping into is zero-point energy that's derived from the longitudinal wave, gravitational waves, which is also, polarity. You have gravity and you have the inverse, the anti-gravity. It's all related to the 3 creative forces, which begin with actually 2 forces, which are the vertical, and that's infinite. That's a gravity wave. That's infinite. And you have your horizontal, which is your electromagnetic, and you actually 2 horizontals, but the 3 creative forces of the cube are your three faces, and they're a polarity. They're the 6 faces of the cube, and that's all related to the square in your dream. And I really believe you've tapped into the 0 point, and you know how to engineer it brilliantly as a toroid engineering, mechanism, technology. And I'm thrilled to be able to share that with you tonight, and I hope someday we can meet.
Well, I hope we can. I hope it won't be too long now. Again, I'd like to point out to people that listening that the electron, light, are the same thing, and magnetism. They all are one of the same. We are just viewing the electron from different angles. That is all we are doing. We cannot, in this technology, isolate magnetism from the electron because they are one and the same.
And, George, if I may, we pick up on that in the film. John explained it to me this way, that when you take a standard white light, run it through a prism, and you see, of course, the band of colors, it is John's theory, what he's talking about now, is that general magnetism also contains 7 bands of specific wavelength magnetism. Is that correct, John?
That is correct. And we have tapped in on one of them, which gives us a very powerful magnetic device, more powerful than the standard system which we use today, because the whole system is in uniform motion, not random motion, which all your magnetic devices are today.
That, of course, has to do with the AC/DC printing of the magnetic fields, correct?
Yes, correct.
Could you turn this into a little toy if you wanted to and build little devices?
Oh, yes. I used to have train sets running on demonstration on the first Sunday of each month.
That's cool. Well, you stay with us, both of you. Final phone calls right around the corner on Coast to Coast AM. Well, next hour, Joshua P. Warren joins us with his paranormal moment. And when we come right back, we'll take final phone calls with Bradley Lockerman and John Searl as we talk about the John Searl story. And it is one heck of a story. That's next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast, and we're going to take your final calls here. So let's go right to St. Paul, Minnesota. Kevin, go ahead. You're up with us, Kev. Thanks for calling.
Hey, guys. Wanted to mention, if you recall the X Prize contest about, I guess 5 or 6 years ago, and it was the contest for the first suborbital flight. There was a gentleman who was an investor in that. He invested in the winning team, and his name is Alan, I believe. He's one of the co-founders of Microsoft, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Paul Allen.
Thank you. I couldn't remember his first name. Paul, that's it. And he actually has a foundation, or at least he did a couple years ago, and what he has dedicated his foundation to, as I understood it, is taking a boatload of the money that he made from Microsoft, and he invests specifically in promising technologies, which is one of the reasons that he invested in the prize so many years ago. But it seems to me like his foundation would be just a hand in a glove with what you're doing, and if you can bring him a workable prototype of it, I would think there might be some tremendous interest in putting together a cross-country tour, with huge media coverage, which is really what you need to bring awareness to not the philosophy or theory that you're talking about, but the fact that you've actually got something that's wheels on the ground going to work.
Well, thank you for your call. I'd like to point out that we are in America now searching for ideal places to set up. We're also setting up a demonstration which will go on tour between radio stations and TV stations to get maximum publicity. Because when they see this, they will see something that is unbelievable. And as far as the scientific world goes, impossible. Yet they will see it with their own eyes. This will help funds to come in.
Okay, very good. Waylon in Houston, Texas, you're up. Go ahead, Waylon.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
This is probably the most amazing thing I've ever heard of. And, I'm not an educated man, but it makes plenty of sense to me. And I think this is the way of the future. And I would like to know if there's a way I could donate towards the research and development of this stuff.
Well, thank you for your call. We're open to everyone who wants to help. We have our chief engineer lives in California. He has done a lot of running about at the moment to meet people for me. But once we can set up in the USA, I'm sure you will be able to give us a helping hand, one way or another.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that there is a specific site for some more detailed information, including an investment page, and you can find that at www.searlsolution, SearlSolution, searlsolution.com. And there is an investment page for people to peruse. And John, of course, is talking about Fernando Morris, the chief engineer of Searl Magnetics.
Let's go to our Skype line. Larry in Austin, Texas. Hi, Larry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been following the SEG for a while now, and I believe John Searl did exactly what he claims he did. And I have the video, too, by the way. I can attest it's excellent. As I understand it, the use of alternating current and DC current is the secret to magnetizing the materials to make the SEG-style magnets.
That's correct.
My question is simple. Why, John, have you not allowed others the opportunity to duplicate your findings? It seems this technology is too important to mankind to have it buried or not have others do peer reviews. So how about publishing the frequencies and ratios for others to verify this?
Well, there are two important issues here. Patent Office says to us, do not patent it, it's a know-how. Second is, terrorists are looking for technology which can destroy things faster. And one of these magnetizers could black out a whole town, probably as much as 50 miles away, if they use that field as a weapon. You would have to buy all new TVs, computers, a power generator would have to be installed to put your power back again. That is why we have set a company up specially to do the magnetic side of people who have been fully trusted, that they will not use the technology to force other people to do things they don't want to do.
When you've tested the levity disk, other than the ones that just took off and they're still going off into the universe, how high up did they generally go?
Well, of course, the height you can adjust now to whatever you want. As we'll see eventually a new document on my website saying that we are setting 200 kilometers orbit path for our crafts to park. That would mean there shouldn't be nothing else there to be any problem to us or to them. Speed, now, what would happen if we were flying, say, from London to New York? We would simply go up above the atmosphere, then shoot across and drop down into New York. Time factor, about 15 minutes.
15 minutes, New York to London. Amazing.
And the price would be cheap.
It sure would be. That is amazing. Let's go to Pewaukee, Wisconsin. Steve, go ahead.
Hi, George.
Hey, Stephen.
Glad to be online with you. Just let you know I've been a listener for over 15 years.
Thank you.
John, I had actually two quick questions, if I may. One would be how would the human body deal with these kind of speeds? First of all.
Sorry, I got to drop to follow you because it's a bit distorted.
Yeah, John, he was asking about if you were on board the IGV, what would happen?
Oh, in fact, as you're sitting now, the force that you actually got playing on you would only be half that amount in the IGV. You would have no knowledge of movement, and you have no sound effects. All you have in front of you is your records, all your data coming in, and directions, winds, and so forth for where you're going to land. It is, shall we say, like sitting in your armchair, looking at your computer. That is the sort of feeling, only you'll feel a lot better.
What causes it to move once it's out of the gravity pull of the planet? How does it still move?
It's what we call the space inertia. That drives it forward. It's the forces of the planets squeezing on its shell, just like if you've got a pip from a seed, from some fruit, and you just gently squeeze, it shoots forward. Well, that is exactly how the craft actually moves. It is forces acting on it that is forcing it forwards. But the trouble is, to prevent it getting out of hand, we have to put power on the top shell to slow it down, to act as a drag, to keep it at the speed we want to go.
And George, I think that caller had a second question.
Well, let's move on because they're jamming up on us here, and we've only got a few minutes to go here, Bradley. So we'll grab as many more final callers as we can. Let's go to Barbara in Stanford, California. Go ahead. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, George and John and Bradley. I have a question. I went on to the website that's linked, and there's no contact area, so it's a little bit confusing as far as, are you trying to sell this technology, or are you looking to develop it, find a collaborative enterprise to develop it, like a university or
a Paul Allen.
Well, what? Well, like there's a lot of companies that would not companies. There's nonprofit agencies like Electric Power Research Institute in Palo Alto that works with all of the utility companies in America and abroad, on nuclear power and different types of power and energy.
I'm not sure, Barbara, utilities would get involved in this. I just don't know if they know how to make any money, John. How would a power company make money on this?
Well, Coast California is one of the places we're looking at to set up. Yes, we're hoping that the power people will allow us to feed the grid, and they can shut down their power stations. They would then make a charge to the users, and they would pay us a percentage of that funds, of that profits.
So they would still make some money, I guess.
Yes. That would be because the infrastructure is in place. We will eventually replace all new homes with the SEG, so they don't need to be on the grid. And eventually, street by street will be replaced from the grid to their own personal domestic unit.
And, George, if I may, John, address for George and his audience, if you were to make a much larger SEG for power and, say, drop it into some of the more disadvantaged places on Earth, like the heart of Africa.
Yes, agree. We can make them to any size. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the moment very much at the African problem. I see that if they had the energy, they could help themselves. We're looking at this carefully. In fact, a lady been to Africa and just back and reported to me that they would find the money there to make the SEG. They would certainly buy it.
How big does a unit have to be, the SEG, for one's house?
Well, for a house, it will be 4 inches high and roughly 18 inches across.
That's it?
And you set it in the wall and forget about it. You take the mains off and you just couple that power into your system, and now you can forget about bills, you can forget about strikes, and you have some of the cleanest rooms you ever seen in a house.
That is amazing. And it just keeps running.
And it keeps running, and you pass it down from family to family.
Would you still have your electrical power inlets where you could plug things in? You'd have to, right?
Yeah, you just plug in as usual. But what we got to remember is that the negative is like the positives. You have to switch them around, the cables around, where the system will only take it in one direction, so that your plus would now be your negative. Your negative would be your positive. That's the only difference in the requirements.
Let's go to Harpster, Ohio. Go ahead, Don. First-time caller. Thanks.
Yeah, hello, George.
Hey, Donald.
And John. Actually, I was wondering, have you thought, John, about taking one of these units and plugging it into the grid like a wind generator and basically backfeeding a meter and making money that way to fund further projects?
Yes, this is in discussion, not only in America, but also in Thailand as well.
Wonderful. It's an amazing show, George, and I've been listening since Art Bell's time.
So
thank you.
Thanks, Don. Thanks for
And as long as people know, we are here in the States to make it happen. And the speed that it happens depends on you.
Well, you've been at this for a long time, John, and it's amazing. It started with a dream when you were a little boy.
Yes. It is strange that I was in the right place at the right time to get those dreams.
Let's go to Michigan, east of the Rockies. Go ahead. Roger, you're up with us.
Yes. John, this is Roger McPherson at 10 GAM Engineering. I worked with John Thomas several years back on your magnets. I'm in a position now we're the largest producer of rare earth materials in bonded magnets in the United States to help you cost-free with your magnets.
Oh, great. That would be greatly appreciated.
If you have John Thomas contact me or somebody else contact me, I have a really sharp engineer working for us. We can help you out.
Like John Thomas there in New York.
Yes.
New Jersey, New York.
Roger, I'll put you on hold, and then we'll get your number, and we'll get it to Bradley and to John Searl. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
All right. Great. Go ahead, Tommy. Pick up Roger's information, and we'll pass it on. I guess that's how it's done, John. That's how you network, huh?
Yes.
And then off you go. Riverside, California. Amar, it's your turn on Coast to Coast.
Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi. It's wonderful to speak to both of you. I've been also following John's work for a while. I had a correspondence with Tom Bearden a few instances last year and this year, and there is a physics behind this, and it does require a proper context. It's not something outside the mainstream. Work by Mendel Sachs, Hal Puthoff, as you know, and a few others. The physics is out there, and there is a way to engineer this. Some folks call it the cement version of SearlFX, rather than the Cadillac version that Searl's put together. But there is a way to do it, and if there's a way to do the physics, then perhaps that would help, like creating a mock-up, and then that would help him perhaps model his design around that larger framework. I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but I hope I'm getting something across.
You are. You're doing well.
Yeah.
All right. Amar, and let me ask you this: this model that he would make, would it be a prototype type model?
Yeah, it can be a prototype first, and then of course you can extend it out. You can make it larger. You always want to start small, and then you can work your way up. And the bottom line is, and from what I'm finding, it's more of an art rather than the physics. The physics is of course necessary, but it is an art to put this together correctly.
That's true, and the physics are the physics. They are there. Why can't you get these units to travel at the speed of light, John?
Well, the thing is, Einstein had it right. If objects on the Earth are at zero speed, on takeoff, you can never get onto the speed of light. The IGV is functioning in a different concept. He's talking about random state. We are talking about uniform state. That's a different world altogether. The craft, because it's in uniform motion, can go on the speed of light and pass it, no doubt. But at this stage, I would not dream of going on to the speed of light till a lot of investigation was done first to find out what happens when you're on the speed of light and what happens if you go past it. There's hardly anything known about it, and we would have to investigate that. before we actually attempted to put a human being on the speed of light.
Maybe one day, John Searl, you'll be in Stockholm accepting the Nobel Prize for Science.
I hope so. Well, I hope the team will be, because
Absolutely.
it's the team that deserves it.
Good for you. John, I want to thank you for your efforts, your work. Bradley, one more time, website, please.
JohnSearlStory.com, one word, JohnSearlStory.com.
Absolutely remarkable, both of you. This is technology that I've wondered about for all my life, and here it is. And the fact that John Searl has created it, has flown it, has used it. It's right there. We'll be back in a moment with The Paranormal Moment and Joshua P. Warren on Coast to Coast AM.